All right, everybody, how's it going? Ariya Massoudi and Curt Weiler here from the Osceola. We have moved to the Rivals Network. If you have not heard the news, and we are so grateful for those of you who have subscribed, those of you who are thinking about it, and those of you who are just listening to this podcast because you enjoy Seminole content. Curt, we've done a lot of introductions, I think, over the last couple of weeks, but for those who have not read your work with the Tallahassee Democrat and kind of starting your resume off with the high note there, let people know about you a little bit before we dive into this podcast.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, I was at the Democrat for 4.5 years. Very excited to be on board now. I mean, now it's weird to kind of still be the new guy or it be a new thing when this is the start of week 3 for me. I started August 1st, but excited to be here. I mean, obviously, the chance to get to work with you is a big part of that. I mean, we go back to the V89 days, Tomahawk Talk on WVFS on the FSU student radio station, and so exciting to have a chance to do something like this again. What exactly this is remains to be seen.
Yeah, back into the student radio days where you and I we began, and look how far we've come. And those of you who have not met me, I was born in Tallahassee and grew up a diehard Florida State fan. My dad works at Florida State. I went to Florida State, as Curt alluded to, where we met at the college radio station. And this program has been my whole life, and I've been so excited to be able to call games with the school, ACC Network Extra, and also being able to call Florida State women's basketball for Learfield on the radio, and being a part of the Learfield network and doing some football work and being able to do the basketball work has been a joy for me. So when Jerry called and said, you know, we'd really like you to come on full time, I'd always been doing some small stuff with the Osceola podcast here and there. I host Tuck Talk with Bob Ferranti for basketball news, and it was a no-brainer, you know, and getting to work with you was a big part of that. I know you and I were both kind of being recruited around the same time, and talking to each other, we're like, this could be kind of fun to kind of get the gang back together. And Jerry and Bob do such a great job, and Pat and Charles Fishbein are going to really crush it in the recruiting area, as well as just bringing you analysis from people with football backgrounds who have played, who have been there. And that's something we're going to do on the show, too, is bring guys on who have played the game. We're still putting together a list of friends that we have that are interested in being a part of this. Some older names who played at Florida State and some newer names that have suited up in the garnet and gold. But we would love for you to help us come up with a podcast name. Something we're trying to start at the Osceola is the Osceola Podcast Network, where we have a handful of different pods for you to enjoy and shows that you can enjoy. And so we're trying to put our finger on what the right name might be. Curt, any early inclinations?
There are so many FSU affiliated. I feel like the problem is the FSU namespace is so there are so many podcasts in the space that I don't know. Like I feel like a lot of the ones you would think of are taken in that regard. I wonder if we don't go something towards our FSV or our WVFS days. We went
You want my favorite?
What's that?
I think people are either going to roll their eyes or love it.
Okay.
It's one or the other. I like guys being dudes.
I mean, this isn't a Steve Adazio path.
That's a Barstool path. Steve Adazio did make it famous, though. What's better than guys being dudes, huh?
I was going to say, I feel like we're buying him low. We're buying the Steve Adazio stock low right now.
This is a podcast, Curt, and I already know and can visually see how many people just rolled their eyes.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
You included, right across from me here, as we're watching this Braves-Mets game that is also on the television on mute. Both of us are big Braves fans. I know there is a Braves contingent on the boards. I have been able to see it on the Pro Sports Forum, and man, I hope Atlanta can figure something out here. These Mets are red hot, and they're playing at a level that we haven't seen from them in quite some time. But the football side of this stuff, Curt, senior writer. I've been tabbed the director of creative media for the Osceola, and we've been going to practices and covering the team and in Charlotte for the ACC kickoff, and we're excited. We are under 2 weeks away from college football, and for those of us who every year, Curt, we are always like, man, college football takes way too long to get back. We are waiting way too long to kick off again. Florida State got a gift. We get to start a week earlier than everybody else and have week 0. Started practice a week early too.
Yeah, it was so interesting. I know, seeing that kind of firsthand, and watching how, like, I would see people in other beats be like, oh, yeah, first day of practice coming up. And I would be like, oh, FSU just had its first scrimmage today. It is great because I remember, from afar, I remember the last few years as week 0, I feel like it's become more of a thing. I've kind of been like, it'd be cool to get to do that. It'd be cool to be a part of, like, the first day. Because the funny thing is, I feel like FSU now is almost on, like, a run of Sunday or Monday games in week 1. It seems like they are perennially, and I wonder if that's FSU putting their name out there, of wanting that. There's definitely something desirable about being in that solo spot where you're the only game on, but it's also like you got to wait longer. So it's nice. It's nice to be a part of that week 0. It's nice that, I'm going to get to cover a game in what, 12 days? That's crazy, and a game that I would think, you don't want to count any chickens, but definitely should snap a pretty unfortunate losing streak FSU's had of season opening losses.
What was the game? The last time they did it?
2016 Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, right?
2017 was Bama. 2018 was VT. 2019 was Boise State. 2020 was Georgia Tech. 2021 was Notre Dame.
Gosh, I remember the Boise State game.
Oof. We don't want to go there.
The first half, I swore on whatever higher deity you believe in that FSU was back.
You were.
I was belligerent to these fans.
You were not the only one telling elite lies.
I was lying to, and there were some Boise State fans that were sitting in the Champions Club in front of me, and me and my boys from high school were up there embarrassing my dad who works at the Champions Club because we were talking all sorts of smack. It had been a while. We were desperate, and seeing the way that team played.
Did they take the high road later in the game?
Heck no, they let us know, and they deserved to.
Yeah.
The fourth quarter, they deserved to tell us whatever they wanted because there was a moment that you kind of realized that ship was sinking and sinking fast for Coach Taggart. But 2016, remember the Deandre Francois? Everybody was anointing him like that was going to be the next great Florida State quarterback. What a game that was!
That was
night
my second year in the beat, and that feels like a lifetime ago,
doesn't it? COVID took 3 years off of everybody's life. It felt like it.
You talked about telling your lies about FSU being back. We obviously need to see the games be played. I'm not by any means proclaiming this FSU team is back before a game has been played. I will say what is really promising and what I think even from videos and photos and all that fans have been able to see, this team is starting to look like it used to. I think you're really seeing some continuity that had been lacking in the program, really in all areas.
It's a team, finally.
Starting to show up under Mike Norvell. How that translates, obviously, the schedule's tough, and I think we're going to talk about the schedule in a podcast next week before kind of the season gets underway. The schedule is real. The schedule is challenging. This team can simultaneously be a good bit better, and that may not reflect in a huge jump up in the record. It may only be 2 games.
Yeah.
But...
yeah. 100%. But I like that you mentioned it's the first time they look like.
Yeah,
it looks like a program. It looks like a program, right? Like it's not coaches coming and going, whether it's by the decision of the athletics administration or a coach makes the decision on his own. This group finally has some familiar faces that they've had since they were young.
You're no longer that the commitment to the youth movement and how that's being paid off, I think, will be a big deal this year. You're no longer. The thing is, as sad as it was, how things fell off, especially just from how Florida State was physically and how that kind of translated everything else, you'd look at Wake Forest and be like, not that much more physically impressive than those guys on that Wake Forest sideline or that Boston College sideline or that Louisville sideline. And so I think you're starting to see Florida State at least being on par with the rest of those teams, and probably I would see even stepping back towards from a physical standpoint. Again, we'll see how that translates on the field in a game setting.
More dudes, right? Like guys you show up and you're like, that's a grown, man.
What do they say? The first off the bus types.
Yeah, and there are more young guys that are showing up 18, 19 years old that you're like, okay, Florida State wasn't getting these kids a couple years ago.
Julian Armello was a guy who day one of camp.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
you see these guys and you're like, hello.
Yep.
That's what an 18-year-old who plays major college football should look like. And so FSU's finally, I think, putting down the foundation, Curt. But that's also building toughness, right? The continuity is building toughness. And that seems to be a theme that not just the media is talking about, but the coaching staff feels is tangible about this team.
Yeah, they just finished up Identity Week with their scrimmage Saturday night, their second scrimmage of the preseason. And that, like, I was playing, and someone beat me too, asking about, I mean, what do you think the identity of this team is? Because you talked about, I'll have a good idea, not like Norvell did, I'll have a good idea what this team is, I think, by the end of the week. And he said, I think it's a team that's tough. And I think we've seen that in glimpses. I think we've seen the buy-in to his culture in glimpses over his first 2 years. I think you look at that North Carolina game in 2020. I think you look at how they finished last year, it's really starting with that North Carolina game last year. And you saw some toughness, and you saw some buy-in, but you didn't see it to start the year against Georgia Tech and at Miami in that horrible loss in 2020. You didn't see it to start last year. I think, the fact that whether that is a bit of maybe messaging, I don't know if there's like, I think they're tough, but I really want to challenge them to be tough. I don't know, but it's interesting. And I will say, I mean, when you go back to look at his Memphis teams, those teams were tough. It is definitely something that Mike Norvell's kind of has a bit of a track record of building.
I think, too, this team seems tighter than any of the others. I think under Coach Taggart, like, the guys liked Coach, like they liked Willie T, and they liked the coaching staff. But there is an aspect of team bonding and trust you have to have in the coaching staff and what it means on the field, right? Not just I like you as a person. You'd be a cool guy to kick it with at a cookout. I got to feel like I'm going to war with you, and I respect your football acumen. And I think there's a right mix there where Norvell's doing all these things to build and bond off the field, but then on the field, you're also building that chemistry together. And Adam Fuller even said, like, we've been Seminoles together for a couple years now. We failed together. We've succeeded some together. And I think just being around each other has a cumulative effect.
It's interesting. I remember I talked to Jordan Travis for a story that I wrote on him at the Democrat before I switched jobs the week of ACC kickoff. And he talked about Norvell and old offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, and I would say the same applies to Alex Atkins. I love those guys because, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but I love those guys because they'll be my best friend, then they'll cuss me out on practice, and then they'll be my best. Like, Mike Norvell, and I would say a lot of his staff members also, have done very good at towing that line between like we are gonna be brothers, we are gonna be friends, but like that line has to be drawn, and I will get after you and push you through anything I can to be your best.
I think building that brothership off the field aids winning on the field, but nothing quite brings people together, whether that's in sports, whether that's in business, whether that's in life, like when you succeed together, right? When you overcome a challenge together, that does something. And the way I think Florida State finished the year last year, the Florida game was disappointing. When you had the bowl game kind of right there.
Oh, definitely right there.
Right there. It was, but the way you finished, I think you started to finally see tangible evidence. And I'm not just talking about us as media or us as fans. I think the players, every pregame speech Norvell was giving him, every, moment in tour of duty where he's like, this is going to pay off. It has to show up in a game, right? Because if it doesn't, you're just kind of like, this guy's just all lip service. He's just a hype man. You started to see it. I think the players started to believe not just in the coach, but then they started believing in each other too. And that's been a theme, I think, talking to Jamie Robinson, is these guys are more accountable of the program as players. It's their program. It's a player's program.
I'll ask you this because you've been around the FSU athletics longer than me. I only really have since I came here as a freshman in college in 2008. If this team is tough, if that is an identity of this team, as Mike Norvell seems to think, I think that's the kind of thing that's hard to know for sure till they get into the muck of it, till they're in a game, till they're up against the wall, all those things. But if that is, what's the last FSU team you would qualify as that? I think 2013 has to be considered tough just because I think any team that good is pretty tough. But I also think that team was mostly just unbelievably talented.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I thought the way that 2017 went when Odell took over for Jimbo, there was some toughness shown there to get to a bowl game.
Sure. Everything
had gone against you that season, from inside the program to outside the program and all the noise, using a Jimboism. But, yeah, I would agree with you because would you say 2014, 2015, 2016?
Not 2014.
Well, I mean, I'm a larger point coming with the grouping. 14, 15, 16, Curt, I think the narrative was like this FSU team's kind of underachieving relative to the talent they have. So then what? Cracks were showing. But then you go, well, what do you attribute that to? And what do people usually say when a team is all that talented and they're not winning the requisite amount of games? Oh, they're not tough. So that's what the narrative I feel like was like even the team that beat Michigan in 2016, right? In the Orange Bowl.
Yep.
That was a good team. But I think there were still people that felt like that team had a higher ceiling than what it finished was.
That was the same team that lost, what was it, 52-10 to Louisville? The day Louisville could have named its score, basically.
The Lamar Jackson game.
Won him the Heisman.
One of the Lamar Jackson games. He had more than one. But yeah, I agree with you. This toughness and
we'll see it early. I mean, because I think you look at it. I mean, we can have this conversation more in a few weeks, but this LSU game feels like one of the most important for a while in FSU in a while. I think we had the same conversation kind of last year about that Notre Dame game, but I don't know.
I agree with. I mean, 100%.
It is very much and the thing is, one way or the other, that Louisville game is going to test that toughness too, because you're either most likely, we don't want to assume Duquesne, but I think we can assume Duquesne as long as the players don't. I think we'll be okay. I think you're either 2-0 and you're going to Louisville as like could Florida State be 3-0, could maybe be ranked and be back, or you're 1-1 and that Louisville game's like pretty darn must win.
Yeah, I think
that will test the resolve.
You would like to go 1-1 in those two games. I think you would love to go you would be over the moon at 2-0. But one or the other has to happen. But I think I agree with you that the LSU one from a national significance standpoint feels like it's going to carry more weight.
To put it in perspective, and I'll be the first to say FPI is not my favorite thing, but I think David Hale, when we did that panel a few weeks ago, said that I think FPI put FSU's odds of starting 3-0 at like 11%. So
it's going to be hard. Yeah, it's going to be hard.
Winning at least one of those is definitely a bit of for different reasons, the Louisville and LSU games would be. But
can you imagine too? When's the last time FSU had early recruiting momentum?
And that's
early season recruiting momentum. It's been a while.
And that's what this season feels like. It feels like is 6-6 going to get Mike Norvell fired?
No,
I'm not sure.
No,
but I don't think it's going to do enough for him in recruiting that it would save him in the long run, is where I tend to fall down on that. Like,
I see what you're saying.
He'd have a pretty hot seat next year.
Building the foundation for an elite program hinges on this season.
I think you have elite recruits who are considering FSU.
They like Florida State.
But they kind of want to see the proof of concept that Mike Norvell's been preaching. At a certain point, after 3 years, you need to see the proof of concept, or else it's like, I like him, I want to believe in him, but he's not shown me.
And if you convince the kid, you got to then convince the parents that they're letting their kid go to a program that you're going to develop to get to the NFL. That's all of their dreams. You're going to be able to compete for something tangible. Nobody says I'm going to college to compete for bowl games. This, it's not the Ivy League. You're not there to do your best. We're not here to give it a good try. Like, you're here to freaking win games.
And
right?
The players would tell you that.
Right. And so these kids and these recruits and these parents, they like Norvell. I promise you that they come to Florida State and they do love this staff. They really love Alex Atkins. I mean, like, that guy is a
hold on to him as long as you can.
Home run. I mean, if you meet him and talk to him for a few minutes, you get it as to why Alex Atkins is so special. They also like the program, right? Like, they do believe in the history and the tradition. A lot of these kids, I say kids, they were 8, 9, 10 years old around the time that FSU was at its peak under Jimbo, right? So these kids grew up with that wear an FSU hat to fourth grade, the way that a lot of us, I don't know how old you guys are listening to this podcast, but for me, 28 years old, you're wearing a Vince Young Texas cap to school every day and a USC Trojans cap every day. And
Traitor.
No, I'm saying that's just the type of thing. Like, if I played college football, that's what to me was deemed as cool, was those programs. So for a lot of these kids, FSU still holds significant weight. And then you visit the campus and you come here and you have a weekend and you're like, I could see myself at Florida State. Yep. But at the end of the day, you've got to be, in a football aspect, you got to be able to win games and develop to get to the next level. Because, and then NIL, obviously, I know a lot of you are probably mouthing NIL. Yeah, you're right. I mean, now how much you can market a kid and what he can make matters too. But toughness-wise, Curt, and we can circle back to that LSU game here in a second. I felt like they were tough last year in a lot of ways. They started to show steps and progression. They weren't losing a ton of games by a wide margin. They were hanging in there. Now, they weren't mentally tough in the fourth quarter a lot of times in terms of details and finding ways to finish games. Maybe that's something they can work on this season.
Yeah, my whole thing with that, I don't disagree with you. I think when you look at how they finished out that season with the 4th and 14, the Miami win, with the win that followed up at Boston College, that was really, I felt like the first time you saw an FSU team deliver an impressive performance and then follow up on it the next week. Where I think a ton of people are like, that Miami win was great. They're not going to go beat Boston College at Boston College. And they did. And they probably should have been worse. We don't need to get it. We don't need to re-officiate the officiating in that game, but it was definitely the case. And my whole thing is I'm always a little skeptical, and maybe mentality-wise it's different. I'm always a little skeptical buying something like that automatically. Like, because they finished in this so strong last year, it will be great to start this year. I don't think that's always how things work. I think sometimes, you'll see it with, I haven't looked at the polls to see this, but like, are there teams last year that finished the season strong and are ranked high this year because of it? And it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
No, I do agree with you. And that's why they've got to create their momentum early this season. I think this team is ready for that. And talking to, Jamie Robinson about early season, and we said we'd circle back to LSU, getting a chance to just kind of kick it with him in Charlotte, and the way they did that event was awesome, where you had plenty of time to chat and even time to turn the recorder off and get to know him and Fabian and Jordan as people. And those guys are funny. I mean, they've got great personalities on them. And Jamie was like, off. It was recorder off, but without giving you every word that he said, he was like, "Yeah, we understand LSU is kind of going to be the moment for FSU to show what we are and who we are, and if we're on our way back." And that's the way he said it. He was like, "Look, I came from the SEC. Trust me, I've circled that game, and that's going to be a moment for all of us to really show how far we have come as a program." And so they get it. I think you got to get through Duquesne, and I think you got to do it convincingly, and don't leave any room for doubt. I'd like
give Tate Rodemaker plenty of reps, maybe even AJ Duffy some.
You would like by the first or second drive of the third quarter to be like, we're in garbage time and feeling pretty good about ourselves here. Let's work on some LSU stuff. Let's work on running some packages that
make them prepare for some stuff.
Window dressing, as I call it, and things like that. Let's start to really focus on LSU.
Maybe don't do that in the first quarter this year like last year.
Right. So, that being said there, and we mentioned Jordan Travis, his ability to run the ball has always been at a high level. I think he burst on the scene, right, with his legs. Who can forget he was playing against Boston College that one year that
First game after
Willie, and Odell runs him out there, and he hits that run, and you're like, where the heck has this kid been all season? And then you knew, like, all right, Jordan Travis's legs are a weapon. But Jordan Travis, as a passer, has become much better, and he's improving at a rapid pace, I think. I'm higher on him than most people are, I think, and I know we've got to watch him play in a game before we're ready to anoint him as, an all-ACC caliber player. But he is, in my opinion, going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC this year. That's just my opinion.
He has the chance to. I'm not sure I'm willing to take that, mostly because the ACC is loaded with quarterbacks this year. I mean, when you look at Tyler Van Dyke, we could talk about Sam Hartman, and it's unfortunate whatever he's going through now, but remains and has been a great quarterback. When you look at Devin Leary, when you look at whoever emerges from that Clemson situation long-term with DJ and Cade Klubnik, when you look at who am I missing? I mean, even like a Tyler... A Jerkovich at Boston College is like a real solid quarterback. Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm missing others too, I'm sure.
Well, there's some, Slovis came to Pitt from USC, and Cunningham, obviously, like you said,
Malik
at Louisville, and you're right. It's a really good quarterback class.
He could be really improved and still not be a top 5 ACC quarterback just because of how good. But no, I mean, you're right. I think for someone like Jordan, who definitely admitted he kind of got in his head a bit and looked at too much social media stuff, kind of when he was struggling and when the narrative was like, but he can't throw. I think an offseason of him being the dude, and even though Tate Rodemaker was improved in the spring and I think has continued this fall, even though AJ Duffy has had his real moments as a true freshman, there was never any doubt. Like, Mike Norvell constantly made it clear, Jordan is our guy. I think that has done well wonders for his confidence and just like knowing like, whereas he's kind of always had someone breathing down his neck, where it's like if he went through too long a stretch of struggles, he might be thinking like, is someone else about to get a shot? I mean, what he went through last year with Mackenzie Milton, and I know he came out of that better. Especially, I mean, they're extremely close friends now. But yeah, I think what that can do for him, just in all areas of not knowing there's no one breathing down his neck, it's his job as long as he's healthy, and I think that could be a big deal for him.
For sure. I think it comes in twofold, right? When you're the guy and you're not worried about the competition aspect of it. Not that they're not competing every day, but when you know you're the guy going into an off season and it kind of becomes your team, I think one, you're able to grow as a leader, because it's easier to be a leader and to kind of voice your opinion or encouragement or critique when you are accepted by the majority of the group as the leader of that locker room. And I don't know that Jordan's ever had the chance to genuinely and 100% be the guy that everyone looks to, at least on the offensive end. And so him being, he said, I'm kind of reserved. I'm shy a little bit. I'm soft-spoken by nature, but I've actually worked on it this year of trying to break out of my shell a little bit and be able to talk. And Coach Norvell said, I have seen him intentionally pull people to the side to get them better, to be able to offer that. And Norvell was like, I'm so proud of him from a leadership aspect. And then there's two, you mentioned it, from a when you're getting all the reps and you're not afraid to make a mistake, I think you just have a better chance at development playing that way. I mean, you're freer in the mind. And so Jordan Travis has definitely improved in that area.
People could spout the stats about, but he didn't throw for that many yards, or, he didn't throw that many touchdowns last year. If you watch 2020 and then watch last year and don't think he improved dramatically as a passer, like, I don't care what stats you want to pull. He improved dramatically as a passer. And it's been really impressive watching him this preseason, even kind of Felix takes another step of being comfortable in the pocket and wanting to show, like, yes, my athleticism is great, but I want to not just bail at the first sign of any pressure. I want to be able to stand in there, let my offensive line work, which obviously an improved offensive line helps him, an improved wide receiver room helps him. But yeah, I think that does wonders for. I mean, I think he's shown just it's been impressive to watch. I mean, we weren't there kind of for his first year. Obviously, we weren't there in 2019 seeing him in practice if it was kind of as bad as we heard at times with how he struggled. But watching him come into his own, and I mean, I think Kenny Dillingham, who's now at Oregon, I mean, maybe the biggest Jordan Travis fan on the planet with how he talked him up just every week in his Monday press conferences. And Alex Atkins is too, and Mike Norvell is too. And I don't know, it's an interesting year for Jordan because he hasn't been healthy for a whole year. He's kind of missed time each of the last 2 years when he kind of became the savior of the season at quarterback mid-year. And I know he talked at ACC kickoff. Who knows? Things can happen. I'm not 100% convinced, but he seemed to indicate he's imagining this is his last year. I mean, it'll be his fifth in college football. So it's an interesting year for him all around.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting older, and at some point, you got to be able to move on with your life, whether that's at the next level in the game or not. But he's playing with a chip on his shoulder, and I think he's trying to – I think he's excited to prove to people that he can throw the football in third and long when he has to, and it's not – always a swing pass or a slant or just taking a deep shot on a 1v1 that's a relatively low-risk throw. I think he's excited to make higher-risk throws. I think the coaching staff is going to have more confidence in calling pass plays for him and scheming more traditional drop-back passes for him. Because at times, because of his inconsistencies, they had to scheme things up where if it was a throw, it was finding a way to roll him out to one side of the field to eliminate the number of targets that he had to go through in his progressions. I think he's ready for the next step, man. I really do believe if he stays healthy, I think Jordan Travis is going to surprise a lot of people. I really do.
Yeah, and we can use this transition too. I think it speaks wonders. I mean, what he did in the past game with who he had at receiver the last few years. I mean, when you look at, FSU hasn't had a 400-yard receiver in either of Mike Norvell's first two seasons. And that's not about Mike Norvell. When you go look at his track record, when you go look at Memphis or even Arizona State or Pitt, where he's an offensive coordinator, he has had huge receivers. That's not the problem. The problem has been the state of the room and kind of how long it took to get things rolling. And I mean, I think last year there was maybe a little frustration over how little that was addressed in the portal. Only bringing in a guy in Andrew Parchment who, yes, he will always have his 4th and 14. I mean, he will go down in Florida State history. But that's really the only memorable moment, I feel like. There wasn't like a weekly Andrew Parchment, oh, wow. I felt like the coaching staff, I think, identified they didn't do enough last year and kind of went the other direction and did almost not. I don't know if there's too much in terms of adding receiver staff FSU's room right now. But what they did, bringing in, I mean, all the guys they have, and we can talk about the newcomers here. It's been something to watch Johnny Wilson this preseason. Is he gonna have moments still of a mistake in a big moment, be it a drop or probably, I mean, that's what it was in the spring more. Yeah, probably. He's not going to all of a sudden be perfect. But after he was real up and down, and it would be like a day of great and a day of horrible in the spring, he's been a lot more consistent. I mean, what I'll always say about him is he just looks unlike anyone else in that room and moves well 4, 6, 7. And so if we see the Johnny Wilson that we've seen and really heard about from scrimmages come Saturday or come against LSU, I mean, that will be big for Jordan too. Ditto, I think Deuce Spann, who's been a surprise. Ditto Micah Pittman. Ditto just a lot of other pieces around him. Ditto Trey Benson.
Well, there was no doubt wide receiving group. FSU felt like it had to go and reassess and retool that wide receiver room. And they did. They went and got a numerous number of guys who I think complement each other well with the way the route running of a Pittman. Hopefully Winston Wright can play at some point this season. I'm not 100% sure, but if he could, that would be a miraculous story that fans should really rally behind. But what a talent he was, at West Virginia coming in. And you got those two guys that are solid, right? They make the plays that they're supposed to. They're cerebral, high IQ football players. And then you kind of have your freakish high upside players. You mentioned Deuce Spann, and he's been turning some heads in not just wide receiving, but special teams as well, being 6'4" with that level of track speed that he possesses at his height. And then Wilson, man, he wows you at least once, more times than not, numerous times, in every practice, right? Like there's always a grab where a guy is right on him. And he just has a large catch radius.
The arms, how he reaches around. Like, I've seen him reach around defenders and make it. He's done that with Ariya Thomas a few times.
Correct.
Been a tough test for him.
Right, and catch radius comes in two forms, right? And they help each other out. One is your arms and where you high point the ball, which Wilson does phenomenally. But two, it's also the body of which you have. And so his width, the ability that he creates with shielding defenders off, plus the long arms and being able to tap into that technique and be able to high point everything away from his body. When's the last time, I can't remember, Florida State had a 6'7" receiver? Greg Carr was 6'6". Kelvin Benjamin was like 6'5.5", close to 6'6".
I feel like you don't see a ton because...
in college football, who do you see that's 6'7" that's a receiver?
Most 6'7" guys don't move that well.
Right. Jimmy Graham was 6'8", but tight end. Was like 15, 20 pounds heavier than what Wilson. Wilson's
probably more.
It was like 250 to 260 was Jimmy Graham. But, Rob Gronkowski kind of that, and I'm not calling Johnny Wilson Rob Gronkowski, but Gronk was that tight end wide receiver hybrid that people were falling in love with. My point is he's a unicorn. Like I just don't really know where else you find 6'7" receivers. I haven't seen many.
And from the spring, you were worried about how much you could use him because you saw some real downs. Like you saw the moments of like, oh, Johnny, you've got to catch.
Well, his hands were questionable coming in.
Yes.
And give the kid credit for going and working on that.
And I will say this, and I don't say this lightly, because obviously the man is probably the most maligned man in FSU athletics right now. I think Ron Dugans deserves some credit.
Yeah,
Ron
he definitely
Dugans
does.
Talked at ACC the media luncheon before preseason started about like he kind of identified Johnny doesn't work as well when he's tired. When he's tired, his arms go. That's what and so he was very intentional, I think, kind of getting him exhausted and getting him on the jugs machine and being like, you're catching now that you're tired. And I think that has something that's made a difference for him. And it's a lot of people have talked about him. Norvell, Dugans, Atkins have talked about how proud they are of Johnny for how he's worked and put himself in a position now where if he has the kind of year, I mean, not to say he even needs like $1,000 year. He could make himself some money.
Oh, he's definitely going to be looked at because of his body.
Yep.
He's on boards and radars now because of his body.
He was a 4-star top 100 recruit out of high
There
school.
are NFL guys and teams that are paying people to monitor. Johnny Wilson's definitely being monitored. So, obviously, he has to play games, guys. Like, we're not here to tell you that he's the greatest player we've ever seen. It has to happen in a game. It has to matter. But you finally, I think, have a threat and a weapon in the red zone especially that you haven't had at Florida State since Auden Tate, maybe. I mean, Kelvin Benjamin before that. And so it's a welcome sign for Florida State to be able to call plays where, I don't want to say he bails you out, but the kid's individual talent and his unique body type just is one of those things where you say, we had him and you didn't. That's it. We had Johnny Wilson, you didn't have Johnny Wilson. And that's the difference. And in the scrimmages, it seems like there are times where, a Duke Cooper is like all over him. And Johnny's just like, I'm sorry, I know you played that perfectly, but I'm just bigger than you.
Speaking of other newcomers, I think Trey Benson could very well be that dude. I think he pretty quickly showed in the spring, even in a small sample size, they definitely had kind of the training wheels on him in the spring with how they just coming off a pretty severe knee injury he suffered, I think, in December of 2020 at the end of that season as a freshman at Oregon. And it was very bad. It wasn't Mackenzie Milton level bad, but I think it was multiple ligaments and some other stuff there. It was severe. There were questions of, is he ever going to get back to like what you saw on his high school film? And I think he has. I mean, you saw it in the spring game. And we've really seen it again this preseason. I mean, I think the case can be made, and I don't mean this as an offense to who was just here, because I think Jayshon Corbin played an important role the last 2 years. I think there is absolutely a world where Trey Benson is an improved Jayshon Corbin, is an upgrade over him as kind of the, I would imagine, premier running back in the stable.
Yeah, I like Benson's game a lot, and he's another one of those special, unique bodies and talents that his physical traits, I just think he does things that they don't grow on trees. And Florida State's blessed to have him. Would you say that's been the most impressive newcomer in your eyes? If you could just pick one right now.
Talking this preseason?
Yeah.
I may go Johnny Wilson.
You're going
Not
Johnny
counting
Wilson.
the spring. If you're talking just the fall, I may go Johnny Wilson. There are some other guys. Bless Harris has continued to impress me. I think there were questions over how a guy from FCS was going to make that jump to FBS, and I think he's made it well and is really pushing for a starting job. Even Dimitri Emmanuel arrived over the summer, has been getting some work with the first team, as will have an opportunity, it seems like, to play, even though he only got here over the summer. I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, too, I mean, I think Jared Verse he's going to make an impact. He's a big talker and backs it up.
I love me some Tatum Bethune.
Oh, and I think
that might be your most impressive.
You know who else enjoys Tatum Bethune?
Guy.
Mike Norvell, who I'm pretty sure said something to the effect of basically said he was flying around the field in both scrimmages, I'm pretty sure.
They're saying that whenever there's a scrimmage or an 11-on-11, this kid shows up.
He's a gamer. It's not to say he doesn't do it in practice. He does it in practice too, but it seems like he is just a guy who unlocks that next level, and he really does it all. I think he's very smart, very instinctive. He's a thumper, a hard hitter, good in coverage, could get all over the field. I think he is everything you want in a linebacker. I wrote a story on the website today about how I think linebacker is one of 3 units I picked out, or 3 areas I picked out that I feel better about now than coming into the year. I didn't feel bad about the linebackers.
No, they've gotten better.
I felt good about Bethune. I felt pretty good about Deloach as long as he carried over what he had.
And he looks pretty good.
I felt good about what I saw in DJ Lundy in the spring, and all of that is carried over and then some.
Yeah, and I think Amari Gainer's getting more comfortable.
If he's your 4th linebacker, I mean, you're in great shape.
Right, and so I'm telling you guys, though, Tatum Bethune,
yes,
I think is going to lead the team in tackles. I think that kid is... I mean, he has a nose for the football. When you see him play for the first time against Duquesne, you're going to say, all right, that guy has a IQ for the game through the roof. And I actually think he's going to be the best linebacker FSU has had in years. Like I'm not willing to say
like not that hard on.
Right. It hasn't been an impressive position group, but
Reggie Northrop's probably the best one in recent memory. And
right, and I think Tatum Bethune might.
You might only get 1 year of him.
I'm a big Bethune fan,
I guess, but I think he is going to make the most of that 1 year here.
Yeah. So those are some newcomers that have stood out. I mean, there's some freshmen too. We've liked what we've seen from McCall and Thomas as well, and those two seem like they're going to get a chance to play early.
I think so, yeah. I'm not sure either of them is going to start game one, but especially, I mean, you look at a game like Duquesne, you would hope those are guys who you can get on the field for sure. I think both have really had their moments in the spring and here. I know AZ, people, it's not to say he's been bad by any means. AZ, I mean, as Marcus Woodson said it, is the best 7-on player in the country. I think is how he said it. We're just like, he is just so good in that game. And I think the pads have been not a challenge for him to be able to overcome, but just an added variable. And it's definitely pushed him. And I mean, Renardo Green's pushed him too. Renardo Green is definitely not given up that starting probably field corner job. And Renardo Green's had his moments. I think Duke Cooper is poised to hold down one spot. And there's a real battle that AZ is in, that maybe even Sam McCall's in terms of who emerges in the long run. Because I think that's something that it may not be entirely locked down of who's the starter until a good bit into the season.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so, the newcomers have impressed. I think this coaching staff decided that there were certain position groups that had to improve. Is there a group, in your opinion, that has improved the most?
Is there a group that's improved? I mean, it may be the receivers, especially relative to what I thought they were going to be. I hesitate to say that a little bit until I see them in the game. I might hedge and say the offensive line is definitely, I mean, there have been a few moments this preseason, as much as we get to watch up practice, where I'll be watching the second team offensive line kind of move guys around and allow the quarterbacks time and allow really there have been a couple days where, frankly, the second team offensive line kind of kicked the second team defensive line's butt. And I really can't remember. I don't know if I've ever really seen that in my time covering practice. Not that we used to kind of at the end of Jimbo when I started get to watch that much of practice. But I think when you look at the depth they have there and a really functioning second team offensive line unlike any they've had in recent memory, that should help them when injuries happen. Because injuries always happen on the offensive line. We obviously already saw one with Caden Lyles going down for the year. And that's a tough one, but it is not, I think, the backbreaker you thought it would be when you got him last December. I think Maurice Smith has kind of responded to that battle pretty well, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, and it pushes some other guys to be depth there behind Maurice.
Yeah, you got Schrader and Estes, and they've got Washington working there some too. So they're trying different things out at center to see what they have and what works. And I think you finally, though, have the depth and the sheer numbers to find a solid 5, right? Like
even if you lose a couple,
right?
Even if someone has to miss a game, even if that happens,
right? I don't think the ceiling of this offensive line is incredible,
it will not be a good offensive line.
It could, but it'll be serviceable or decent,
and even with some injuries,
right? But when you raise the floor for any position group, I think the bottom line and worst case scenario just looks a lot better than what it did last year. So I think Florida State fans will feel pretty good about this offensive line, especially in run block. I think they have done a wonderful job in their run schemes, and these guys are comfortable. Now, passing schemes and pass pro, we'll see. That's going to depend on some of the D-lines that you face. Duquesne's not going to present much of an issue. LSU definitely will present some issues. They've got some dudes on their D-line. Yeah, as you get later in the season, for sure.
You talked about that. We should talk about, I mean, the added thing of the receivers. Despite the state of the receiving room in the last few years, the run game's been really good. I wonder what a receiver group that opposing defenses have to fear a lot more, especially for the deep ball. I wonder what that does for the run game. If defenses are kept more honest, because defenses would stack the box, and FSU would still run the ball sometimes successfully just because of how well Mike Norvell and Kenny Dillingham scheme some of that stuff up.
I agree with you. I mean, I think if you've got defensive coordinators having to prepare for more things and be a little more hesitant about certain aspects of the game that they have to defend, that only opens things up for an offense and what you can and can't do. So that's definitely a good point, Curt. But that's an improved group there. Is there a group that has impressed you the most out of any of the other position groups?
I'll say another group that I think has impressed me. I'll be interested to see how much it's this year versus in the future. I think coming into this season, I had some questions about the tight end room behind Cam McDonald. I think you had a solid number one in Cam, who Mike Norvell has said has been a little limited this preseason. He's been dealing with something. There hasn't been any indication that it's serious yet, but that it's something that would cause a major problem. But he's been a bit limited. So there was definitely fear. I mean, there was, I think, some moments of coming into the season thinking about it, like is Wyatt Rector going to end up being your second tight end? And it's like nothing against Wyatt Rector, who's I think good in the run block and can make some catches. But he is somewhat limited in his skill set versus what you want a tight end to be. And I think you wanted Jackson West to be that guy. And in the spring, he just didn't really show you enough of it. He struggled with drops too, like Johnny Wilson. And this preseason, you've seen more from Jackson. You've seen Marquiston Douglas. I mean, Marquiston Douglas, who Alex Atkins said, I mean, was brief for a time, spending time with the offensive linemen. They were like, is this where his future is? And he's now at a place where, I mean, he could very well end up being their second tight end. He's had a really strong camp. I mean, you see his size, and you know he's going to be solid in the run blocking responsibilities of the position. But he's also been a really good, like a receiving threat, and is definitely capable of being he's more athletic than you would think when you look at him. I know some people call him Biscuit, and that's but yeah, he moves well for his size. And another guy, I don't think it will be this year, just because he definitely needs to put on some weight. I think he needs. But Brian Courtney has really impressed me. Talk about a true freshman in that room who they definitely took a chance on. He was a high school quarterback, was not really rated at all as a prospect until he committed to FSU, and was not a guy a ton of other programs were in on. And when he's been out there this preseason, he just feels like he makes a pretty impressive catch a day. For a guy who's playing quarterback, and this is really his first time, I think when he talked to us early this preseason, he talked about, like, I haven't really played anything besides quarterback since fourth grade. It looks pretty natural for him. Like, he is just a natural playmaker, pass catcher. And so I think he's a guy who, as he bulks up and kind of puts his quarterback pass behind him more in terms of how he looks, could really be a contributor for them when they need that especially that receiving tight end option for the future, with Cam entering, I think, his last year.
Yeah, I mean, those are things that, now that we get to be at practice for the entirety of it, we can see guys develop and really see their growth within 11 on 11s and practice to practice. So keeping our eye on that. But nationally, too, something we're keeping our eye out for. I mean, this LSU game, Miles Brennan, who I guess got told LSU's quarterback last year, who spent the majority of the season getting snaps with the first team, he's walking away from football. And so it seems like Jaden Daniels, the Arizona State transfer, is going to be who Florida State sees over there in New Orleans. Is it Mercedes-Benz Stadium still? Did they change the name?
Mercedes-Benz Superdome.
The Superdome.
Mercedes-Benz Stadium's
Atlanta. Okay, so the Superdome. Yep. That's who you're going to see with Jaden Daniels.
No, it's not. It's Caesars.
That's what I thought.
It's Caesars.
So I was asking you.
I completely forgot.
Yeah, they changed the name.
Yeah, it's Caesars. Caesars Superdome.
And that's the first time I think Florida State's playing in that stadium since beating Mike Vick and Virginia Tech in '99.
I think we were talking.
Was there maybe
about
one more, actually?
There was, I think.
Georgia
yes.
Sugar Bowl.
Yes.
I do remember that game. Anquan Bolden.
The one he had to play quarterback.
He played
right?
quarterback.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of issues that game. I remember that game. Wow, that was DJ Shockley, I believe, quarterback for UGA that year.
There's a throwback.
Yeah, that is a throwback. So first time since 2000 and what was it, 2 or 3?
I mean,
it's been a long time, 20 years or so.
For a city that's relatively close, and I'm sure there's a decent FSU contingent there. I know it's been a while, and so I'm sure those people are excited. I know I'm very excited.
Yeah,
and it is to call it a litmus test game is probably still an understatement, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's a litmus test in terms of quality of our program being back, per se. I don't think LSU is going to be very phenomenal this season.
You don't think Joe Tessitore is going to break out the Florida State
back?
Yeah,
I remember that. That was a funny time. That was also the same weekend as Ole Miss Florida State.
It was. I remember watching that in Orlando the night before that game because that was the Sunday night game.
Yeah, so I don't know, the quality on the field. I do think LSU is vulnerable right now, and that's a program brand name that you need to beat for recruiting purposes, for where you're trying to go and for the statement you're trying to make for Florida State's national significance. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels is interesting. He's no doubt talented. FSU's played him before. FSU played him in the 2019 Sun Bowl. He was the quarterback as Arizona State as a true freshman that year.
I almost forgot Florida State played that game.
Yeah, I was there, and I almost forgot Florida State played that game.
I think I remember now. James Blackman threw how many picks?
Too many, like 4, I think maybe.
Was one inside like the 2-yard line or something like that on a slant play? I think I remember that.
What's interesting about Jaden Daniels, Brian Kelly is a heck of a coach, and I think is going to get a lot out of him, no doubt. But Jaden Daniels is interesting where, I mean, you look at him as a freshman at Arizona State, threw for 2,900 yards more, 17 touchdowns and 2 picks. You look at last year, threw for 2,300 yards, 10 touchdowns and 10 picks. That's a pretty weird regression. Like, that is a staggering, like, whoa, you were really good as a true freshman. What happened? Maybe some of that speaks to what was going on at Arizona State. I mean, no doubt Arizona State's a mess right now under Herm, but it's he's athletic. It's not unlike Jordan in some ways. I don't want to just say that two quarterbacks who can both run are identical, but will present some real challenges for the defense that we saw get a lot better last year as the year went on, and brings back almost everyone from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's news we're keeping an eye on. Florida State's opponents, and then Sam Hartman. My heart breaks for him. And he's a really talented quarterback at Wake Forest, and he's going to miss some time. We don't know the extent of how long. Non-football related condition that he's had to go get checked out. Florida State plays them October 1st. Wake Forest, I want to say it's early October.
No, maybe the 8th. Is Boston College first?
It's the first or second weekend in October. Curt, while you look that up, I mean, that's big, I think. If Hartman can't go, Wake Forest, especially when you looked at them last year, a juggernaut on offense, really shaky on defense. You kind of wonder if they're still shaky on defense this season. It was October 1st. Kurt's throwing up the one sign at me. So cool. But if the offense takes a step back for Dave Clawson's group, that game becomes more winnable for Florida State. Obviously, I would like for Hartman to be healthy and play for what it means for the kid. But you do have to factor that into win totals and percentages and win probabilities and all those fun things that we like to do.
Yeah, it's like you said. I mean, your heart goes out to him and really everyone involved in that situation. I know that's heartbreaking, but it will be interesting to see how that changes things for Wake, because I know Wake was. I mean, they weren't really a trendy pick to compete in the Atlantic, because that really feels like a 2-horse race between Clemson and NC State. I doubt they would have repeated, but you never know. I mean, they brought back some nice pieces from that. Sam Hartman's a heck of a quarterback, and will no doubt be missed by that program.
I mean, I think is A.T. Perry. He's also returned. So
yeah, but he won't have, at least to start the season, Sam Hartman throwing to him, which makes a difference. It was A.T. Perry who killed FSU last year.
It feels like he's killed Florida State multiple times. It's always one little receiver from Wake that goes for 200 yards or something like that. But so that's something else we're keeping an eye on as well. So I think that's all our time for this podcast for this week. Again, we do appreciate you guys listening. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. The Osceola. We're doing great work and now a part of the Rivals Network. Just check us out. Kurt's been working hard on articles and covering the team all week. And help us come up with a name, if you could, for this podcast. We're going to mull over it for the week, try and nail it down by next week or so. But our plan for this is a relaxed pod talking Noles sports, and hopefully, a few players will be added onto this show, and maybe we'll have like a little round table, guys on a couch just kind of throwing it back and chatting. Yeah, we'll have some fun. This is something that I think you guys will enjoy. Ask us questions. Let us know your thoughts on a podcast name. Keep reading on and share with your friends that the Osceola has moved over to the Rivals, and we would love their support and their subscription opportunities if they're willing. Just check us out, see if you like us, and we are excited. I think Curt and I both, alums of Florida State, we're stoked, man. We're getting really close to kickoff.
It's been stressful. There would have been plenty of reasons it would have been nicer or easier. Easier is probably the word, to take over this not right before football season, not August 1st, 3 weeks before kickoff. But it's really exciting to be taking over and kind of going right into this venture at such an exciting time. I think it has the chance to be the first year that I think Florida State fans are happy with in a while, as long as you have realistic expectations. Your expectations can't be old school 10 wins or bust expectations. But if you have realistic expectations, I think this is a team that could live up to them, which hasn't happened in a while, and it should be a fun ride to cover them.
Yeah, it should be. So we're getting there under 2 weeks until Florida State plays against Duquesne in week 0. Curt and I will be back next week with another episode, hopefully with a name for this podcast as well. So for Curt Weiler, to my left, I'm Ariya Massoudi, and we'll talk to you soon.